the sinister encounter on the road. During the 1980s, a truck driver named Mike was known for his long trips along Interstate 70. He enjoyed the freedom that the road provided and often drove at night when the highways were quieter. However, that night, something was different. The sky was covered in dark clouds, and a thick fog began to spread across the road, making visibility nearly non-existent. As he drove, Mike felt a growing unease. The truck's radio was tuned to a classic rock station, but suddenly it started to fail, cutting out with crackles. The driver glanced at the dashboard and saw the fuel light flashing. He knew he couldn't stop in an isolated place to refuel, so he decided to find a gas station as quickly as possible. As he searched, the fog thickened, and the atmosphere became oppressive. After a few miles, he spotted a figure at the side of the road. It was a young woman, dressed in a stained white shirt and torn jeans, with unkempt hair and a look of despair. Mike hesitated, but upon realizing she was clearly terrified, he decided to stop. As he opened the truck door, the woman quickly jumped in and closed the door behind her, nervously glancing at the road. "Please help me. He's coming," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. Mike, confused, asked who was coming, but she didn't answer, only continued to look back as if expecting something horrible to appear in the fog. Mike began to drive again, speeding up in hopes of finding a safe place. With every mile, the woman became more agitated, her hands trembling as she gripped the seat's armrest. As they drove, Mike started asking questions. "Are you hurt? What happened?" The woman told a harrowing story. She had fled from an abusive ex-boyfriend who was stalking her. He was obsessed with her and had threatened to kill her if she tried to leave him. Mike, feeling a tightness in his chest, promised he would take her to a safe place. After a few more minutes, they reached a small town and decided to stop at a gas station. Mike hoped the woman would feel safer in a public place. As he entered the store to pay, he turned to introduce the woman to the attendant, but when he looked at the passenger seat, he froze. The woman had vanished. He rushed outside, searching for her, but there was no sign of her anywhere. The attendant, seeing Mike's despair, asked what had happened. Mike, still in disbelief, described the woman, but the attendant looked at him with a serious expression. "There's no missing woman here. You must be mistaken," he said. Mike didn't believe it and decided to check the cab, where he found a necklace with a heart-shaped pendant on the passenger seat. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was identical to the one the woman had been wearing. Desperate, Mike called the police, who confirmed that the necklace belonged to a woman who had disappeared years earlier in the area. He was shocked and began to research more about the case. He discovered that the woman had been murdered by her ex-boyfriend, who was never caught. The truck driver was left with the feeling that he had encountered a spirit still wandering the roads, seeking justice or peace. The story haunted him for years, and he never drove at night again without checking the passenger seat, hoping to see the woman once more. The traveling truck. In 2010, a truck driver named Tom was on a night route along the famous Route 66, one of the most iconic roads in the United States. He had a deep love for the freedom that the road provided, but that night, the atmosphere was tense. The sky was laden with clouds, and lightning illuminated the horizon as if hell itself were about to open up. A storm was approaching rapidly. As he drove, Tom noticed that the radio began to fail, shifting from a smooth tune to deafening static. He adjusted the frequency, but instead of finding a station, he heard a weak and distorted voice. "Beware, they are coming." Tom's heart raced. He thought it might just be interference, but the message sounded real and urgent. Adrenaline coursed through his veins, and he accelerated, deciding to ignore the warning. Shortly after, Tom spotted a truck coming from the opposite direction, with its lights off and a strange silhouette in the driver's seat. He felt a chill run down his spine as he passed the vehicle and realized that the driver was staring at him with a disturbing smile that seemed more like a taunt. Tom didn't know what to do. His intuition told him to speed up, but something kept him rooted to the spot. The storm began to intensify, and the wind howled terrifyingly. He decided to stop at a gas station on the side of the road to refuel and try to calm down. Upon entering the cafe, he noticed that the attendant, an elderly man with a tired gaze, was paying attention to his worried expression. "Are you all right, young man?" asked the attendant. Tom, still agitated, explained about the truck he had seen and the strange feeling he was experiencing. The attendant looked at him with a somber expression. "Many travelers have heard those voices here. This place is known for its tragic history. Years ago, there was a horrible accident on this road, and many who died here still wander among us." The old man began to tell about the ghost truck that many saw at night, always following lonely drivers. According to the legend, the spirit of the driver who died in the accident was still searching for a passenger, hoping that he could help him find peace. Tom, a skeptic, decided he didn't believe in ghost stories. He said goodbye to the attendant and returned to his truck, determined to continue his journey. However, as he drove, the voices on the radio returned, louder and clearer. "Turn back, turn back." The words echoed in his mind, and with each mile, he felt that something was following him. When he looked in the rearview mirror, he saw the same truck with the mysterious driver right behind him, now with its lights on, as if it were rapidly closing in. Desperate, Tom decided to make a risky maneuver and turned onto a side road, believing he could lose the truck. The ghostly vehicle followed closely, its lights shining intensely. Adrenaline took over, and Tom drove faster, his breath coming in short gasps. When he finally managed to distance himself, he spotted a curve and decided to take the risk. But when he turned, he encountered a tree trunk blocking the road, forcing him to stop abruptly. With his heart racing, he looked back, but the truck had vanished. The road was empty, and he felt somewhat relieved, but the sense that something was wrong didn't leave him. Just as he decided to continue, the radio started to fail again, and a voice whispered, "You escaped, but they will always come back." From that moment on, Tom knew he had to stay away from Route 66 at night. What should have been a simple trip turned into a nightmare, and he never looked in the rearview mirror again without feeling a chill run down his spine. The lonely traveler. In the early 2000s, a truck driver named Rick, an experienced roadman, was crossing the Arizona desert on a solitary journey. He enjoyed the solitude and the freedom that life on the road provided, but that night, the loneliness felt oppressive. The sky was filled with stars, but an unsettling silence surrounded the road. As he progressed, a sense of discomfort grew in his chest. Rick began to hear murmurs, as if people were conversing behind him. At first, he thought it might just be the sound of the wind, but as the night went on, the murmurs became clearer, as if someone was trying to communicate. "Turn back! Turn back!" The voices seemed to scream, and Rick's heart started to race. Determined not to let his imagination deceive him, Rick stopped at an isolated gas station to refuel and try to calm down. The attendant, an elderly man, noticed Rick's worried expression and asked if everything was all right. Rick, hesitant, decided to share what he was feeling. The attendant listened attentively and then told a dark story about the road. Years ago, a horrible accident happened here. A group of friends was traveling to a party when their car collided with a truck. Everyone died instantly, and since then, many drivers have reported hearing their voices, screaming for help. The attendant said, his voice low and reverent. Some believe that the souls still wander here, looking for a way out of this place. Rick fell silent, absorbing the attendant's words. He decided he needed to continue his journey. With a brief thank you, he returned to his truck and started the engine. But as he drove down the dark road, the voices returned, now louder and more insistent. Turn back, turn back. It was as if the lost souls were desperate to be heard. As he drove on, the dashboard lights began to flicker, and the atmosphere in the truck grew tense. He wondered if he was losing his mind. Then suddenly, a series of ghostly figures appeared on the road ahead, all with expressions of pain and despair. Rick slammed on the brakes, his eyes wide with terror. The figures vanished the moment he stopped, as if they had never existed. The driver felt a wave of panic. He was about to faint when he decided he needed to get off that road. He put the truck in gear and began to drive at high speed. However, the voices would not leave him alone. They echoed in his mind, mixed with memories of his own life, his mistakes and fears. He was no longer just a truck driver. He was a man confronting his own demons. After a long, agonizing journey, he reached a small town and decided to stop at a diner to catch his breath. The waitress noticed his pale face and asked if he was all right. Rick didn't know what to say, but he shared his experience with her. The waitress listened, and with compassion, told him that everyone had fears and it was important to face them. Sometimes the road leads us to confront what we want to avoid the most, she said softly. Feeling comforted, Rick decided it was time to face his fears. He left the diner with a new perspective, ready to confront the ghosts that haunted him, not just on the road, but within himself. And although he would always remember that night, it became a turning point in his life, teaching him that the journey was as important as the destination.